how did you end up starting that business?
Yeah, that's another good story, right? Well, I call it a side hustle. I don't know if we could call it a business yet. It breaks even at this point. It's kind of meaningless if you get a B or a C or whatever. It doesn't really matter. This big giant building on Beaudry, LAUSD headquarters, and we sort of beg for their acceptance.
I mean, the startup culture, I think, had a lot of influence, and the pandemic obviously had a lot of influence, because when you're behind the camera, what you wear under the shirt doesn't really matter.
One of the first things we said is, hey, parents, you are staff members. You're teacher aides now. You remember how you learned this in school. These are ways you can teach. And we shout each other out like, wow, you just had a great lesson on fractions. I'm going to try and steal that.
Your students call you Mr. Manager or Mr. M.
Yeah.
But I'm going to call you Captain Chris. Captain Chris.
Aye, aye. And they can go snorkeling. And, we even did night snorkeling last time where you see the glowing squids and stuff.
Wow,
I would love myself to go on the summer camp.
The Avenue of the Strongest is a podcast dedicated to exploring the lives and experiences of the most inspiring individuals from around the world. Each episode features interviews with fascinating guests who share their insights and wisdom on a variety of topics, including education, impact, motivation, health, and learning. I'm your host, Ania Chowdhury.
And Vlad Suleiman.
And today we are super excited to speak with Chris Medinger. Chris founded the K-8 charter school, the Everest Value School in Los Angeles. At the Everest Value School, their mission is to provide high-quality education for students who have been historically underserved by the public school system. The results speak for themselves. Looking at the SBAC results, students at Everest Value Schools continue to outperform neighboring schools and districts on test scores. Join us today as we speak about starting a charter school, student learning loss from COVID, and building a great culture. Chris, welcome.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm honored.
Yeah, absolutely. This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning educational publisher serving over 1 million students nationwide. If you're a kindergarten to 8th grade teacher or principal, be sure to check out our supplementary workbooks to get your students ready for standardized state testing. We cover all subjects from kindergarten to 8th grade. Use the coupon code AVENUE for a 25% discount off of all purchase orders. Visit us today at argoprep.com/store. Chris, your story is fascinating, but my first question is, how does one start a charter school? What does that process look like?
Well, it's different in every state. And so I taught in California. I'm actually originally from outside of New York. Moved out here, went to college. And I got into charter schools in that there's a lot of freedom in the school. And my principal is very open-minded. And through that, I earned her trust and became a mentor teacher, and met the founder of our charter organization. And the way it works in California is you actually literally write a charter. So it was about a 50-page document in which we wrote about the existing school I was teaching at, the scores, and at that point it was called the API score that we had built and grown. And we talked about the demographic we were going to serve. We talked about how our school model is different than the district school. And then we go to this big giant building on Beaudry, LAUSD headquarters, and we sort of beg for their acceptance. And, I think the most important thing they look for is that you know what you're talking about.
Right.
And that you're doing something that's different than a normal district school would offer. Our model at Value Schools, which is the network we're in, was that we actually are kind of built on a character model. To be honest, our founder actually was in the Catholic school system. And he saw that small schools that really took care to the culture of the school and the character of the students, and principles and sort of moral values, that is what created learning, and it created a safe learning environment. And so he left the Catholic school network and founded the organization. So our charter was really based on this character first approach, and that if you build good people, good citizens of the world, that eventually the academic scores and the achievement, all that stuff would come from there.
Mm, okay, I see. And is it the same as in New York where you have to go grade by grade? So each year you go you can add on a grade, or is it
Yeah,
different?
well, this is good. Good segue here. So that's the best approach. That would be best practice. For us, we really struggled to find a building. So
Mm,
I was still at the old values at the old. It's called Downtown Value School where I taught. I was able to have weekly parent meetings to gather some momentum. I had a kindergarten class and a first grade class really excited about the new school, but we just couldn't find a building. And then it wasn't until April of the year we started that we found this giant church, 6 floors on Wilshire, like giant, like from 1912. Um, and the way that the ADA laws work is you can't have classrooms for kindergartners unless they're on the first floor.
yep.
So I was sort of stuck. So I had this giant building, 6 floors high, with all these classrooms on the fifth floor, and a bunch of kindergarten parents who wanted to come to our school. And so we just flipped into recruiting mode quickly. And we ended up recruiting 200 students in our first year, K to 8. And as I
Without a
got more
building,
than, yeah,
or
so we kind of,
okay.
so we recruited all 9 grade levels in one summer, hired all those teachers.
Wow.
We call ourselves the microwave school because, bing, we were ready to go. And it was a wild ride. I think what was good about that model is that we were able to recruit siblings. So
Okay.
like if there was a family of 3 or 4, I was like, hey,
Right.
bring them all in. We got a spot in
Right.
third grade, fifth grade, whatever you need. The hard part there though was, when you recruit like that, you're finding sort of some lost souls out there. Like there's not often that people are looking to switch schools in fourth or fifth grade, right? So
Right.
we ended up with like a high percentage of special ed, high percentage of ELs, high percentage
Okay.
of even students that were expelled from other schools.
Okay. That makes
So we
sense.
really doubled down on our culture. We had like a haunted house party. We had like one event after the other to really build steam around our culture the first year. And I don't know if you saw our scores the first year, they weren't great. They were at like
Mm,
20% proficient in both subjects. It wasn't until our second and third year that we really laid in the structures for teacher mentorship and data driven instruction. So by the second year, 2016-17, we were over 45% proficient in both.
wow. Wow. That's actually impressive for those of you who don't know. That's actually quite an achievement for from year one to year two. Now, yeah, that sounds very intense. But I think your background is interesting because I want to talk about the strengths of your background. Now, your last name is Medinger. Did I get that correct?
You did, you did.
Now, we were having this discussion before we started the podcast, but your students call you Mr. Manager or Mr. M, but I'm
Yeah.
going to call you Captain Chris. Captain Chris. It's
Aye, aye.
I saw a video. It's amazing. So for those of you who don't know, Chris over here, you have a business called the Blue Moon Dolphin Cruise, where groups of friends or families can book a private boat to see dolphins and whales near the Marina del Rey. I kind of want to go back. How did you end up starting that business?
Yeah, that's another good story, right? Well, I call it a side hustle. I don't know if we can call it a business yet.
Fair
It
enough.
breaks even at this point. But yeah, as a teacher, I was teaching. I had the summers off. I really wanted to live near the ocean, and on a teacher's salary, you really can't do that. So I found a fixer-upper kind of old trawler, and went for it. And instead of paying a rent, I paid the mortgage on the boat. Lived aboard
Hmm.
for about 5.5 years. Got a captain's license, learned how to fix everything kind of thing, and realized I loved going out in the ocean. And in Santa Monica Bay, there are just tons of migrations of whales and dolphins. And there's an underwater canyon. It's called Redondo Canyon. It goes 5,000 feet deep, just 3 miles off the coast. And all the water from the bottom of the ocean comes to the surface. And it's like upwelling of this plankton. And it's a
Hmm.
trail where all the migratory animals go by.
Wow.
And once I sort of saw that and discovered like, hey, I can get 8 out of 10 trips, I could find dolphins. I
Yeah.
was like, I got to make a business out of this.
Yeah.
And so it's funny. I watched this movie. I don't know if you remember the name of this. There was a movie against SeaWorld kind of where it's like, oh, SeaWorld treats dolphins poorly. And they
Okay.
were killing dolphins in Japan or something like that. I realized I met that filmmaker actually. And I spoke to her about how much more powerful it is to go to the dolphins in their home as opposed to going to them in some little tank. And she was all about it. And she gave me a lot of good ideas. And from there, yeah, that's what it is, the Blue Moon Dolphin Cruise. And there's nothing like that moment where these kids see a dolphin right along, they'll go right along the bow of the boat or something, that, it's just pure joy. And so, I mean, whether or not I make money on it, it's just a great time to go out. Now that I'm a principal and married with kids, I don't get to go out as much, probably a couple times a year. I have these other captains like that take it out and stuff, but I live vicariously through their videos and stuff. We just saw a bunch of humpback whales last weekend, which is amazing.
Wow.
And it's throughout the year, or there is some season?
What's cool about LA is there's really not a season. It got a little rainy this winter, but I mean, January could be just as beautiful as August, really. I think the 1 or 2, it's like February, March isn't the greatest. It gets a little windy.
So I guess it's very nice for business.
Yeah, I can't complain. And to be honest, COVID was amazing. We were able to stay open all through COVID, and that was the only fun thing to do at that point. So we were blowing up. Yeah.
I was actually that was literally my next question. If COVID impacted your the cruise
in a getaway,
in a good way,
in a positive way. And so what's fun too is we do in LA we do TV shows and movies and stuff. So a lot of CGI. We were in this movie called Super Shark that aired in Germany, where like sharks could jump out of the water and eat helicopters and stuff. So there's all kinds of fun things that come along with just, having an opportunity like that. The one other thing too is I use it with the school too. So like for kids who are doing a good job, particularly in our after school program, we'll take them out as a reward for their hard work and stuff. And I piloted this trip. There's an island called Catalina right off of LA where there's a bunch of summer camps out there. So my knowledge of Catalina has really kind of helped build an outdoor education program for these kids in LA to get out there. And they can go snorkeling. And, we even did night snorkeling last time where you see the glowing squids and stuff.
Wow.
I would love myself to go on the summer camp.
Yeah. You should look it up. Cool. It's CIMI, CIMI. If you ever get out to LA, it's a great spot.
CIMI.
I will. I actually will be on the West Coast soon, maybe in 30 days. So I'll check it out.
Oh, definitely. Come by. You should come see Everest.
I will.
Yeah.
So, so we spoke about the COVID, how it impacted your business. So your business was booming, but let's now switch to the learning loss. So how COVID affected the education. So given your many years of experience as an educator and a leader, can you walk us through the current climate?
Sure. I mean, what I would say is COVID was a moment. And in a charter school, there isn't necessarily guidance the same way. There's not like a top-down way of doing it. It's a little bit like the Wild West. So, March of 2020, there was sort of almost a withholding of information, I would say, from LAUSD. We weren't really sure what was going to happen. And then we got a call on Friday, like we all got to go home. And I remember like in 3 hours printing out like thousands of packets for kids just to go home with something. And then we just started to figure out, well, what are we going to do? And, we brought home computers. Immediately, I felt like researching was the best approach. So I reached out to other colleagues in what people were thinking about doing, what other countries even were doing. And we really define like synchronous learning as so important. So whereas a lot of schools sort of said, here, stick with the packet, good luck, kind of, we made sure as soon as possible we could get some live interactions going at every grade level. And that was our secret. And I would say, I mean, within a few months, we had a reopening plan where we had phases. We're like, hey, if COVID's here, we're going to be remote. If it gets better, we're going to be phase 2, phase 3, and all those things. We really tried to work that out over that first summer. So parents had a really good idea of what to expect. And when we bounced back and forth, it got more and more seamless where the teachers and the parents are like, oh yeah, I remember phase 2. Hey, we're going back to phase 2. Let's do this again, And we built a whole toolbox of ed software programs that were key, and they were really good. What I would say, I mean, the synchronous learning was important to teach new concepts, but that ed software stuff was crucial for spiraling back, reinforcing learning, and a sort of a cadence of sort of Monday, Tuesday, really heavy on synchronous, Thursday, Friday, heavy on ed software review and looking at data. That was our secret sauce, really. And where lots of schools went down, we went up significantly over COVID. And the other piece I want to mention too is just the relationship with parents. I mean, we've always had that relationship since we founded, but during COVID, one of the first things we said is, hey, parents, you are staff members. You're teacher aides now. So we're going to give you not just what your kid has to learn, but how to teach. So we're giving them like, hey, this is how you use a graph paper notebook. You remember how you learned this in school. These are ways you can teach like graphing or fractions or adding and subtracting. Like the more we got them bought into their own impact on the mastery, the better. I mean, Everest has always been built on this idea of a learning key. So every grade level has a list of kid-friendly standards we call learning targets, and we give them to the kids, we give them to the parents, so they take them home and they check them off themselves like a to-do list. And so that was already sort of built in. In COVID, that framework really, really took the next step because they knew already like what the learning targets were for their grade level, and they could go advocate for their own learning, go, on their own quest through Google searching for programs and stuff. Yeah. They could come to a Zoom already with questions saying, hey, I'm working with this. What do you do if my kid's confused by that? So having like those parents really educated in the idea of teaching and learning and how to bridge those gaps and stuff, that was the secret sauce.
Can you give some example of the checklist that you are speaking about for some grade level?
Yeah, I mean, so like what we do as teachers, and we kind of like hand me down now at this point, like no one's redoing these, but like the teachers when we were founding Everest looked at the standards. I don't know, like they're pretty complicated. If you look at the Common Core standards, they're pretty jargon filled and kind of meaty there. So we pull them off, and it would be something like an I can statement. I will be able to find a common denominator by finding the greatest common factor, whatever those things are, right? Make it super simple to where a kid could understand it, or a parent who hasn't been to school in 30 years or something could understand it. And it's also something that we have an after school program that's internal to our school. So those staff members work during the day and they also work in after school. All those guys were on Zoom, or guys and girls were on Zoom. So they were available to answer questions and have tutoring time in Zoom. And they just asked that, hey, bring your learning key to the Zoom and we'll figure it out. We can have some lessons on whatever you're having trouble with. And it was just the monitoring of the learning that sort of really was the difference.
Now let's talk about the reform in education.
Sure.
This is a topic, and we've discussed it with many principals before, that this is really hot topic, and there is constant debates, thoughts, ideas, and experiments. So what are the most promising education reforms you support?
Right now, I mean, I'm all about schools of choice. I mean, I really believe like that parents understand their kids really well, and that there is a wide range of opportunities. Like my daughter right now is just about to turn 5, so we're in the market in a sense for looking for great schools. I know you have the same thing in New York, where it's like, you have the great schools, the elite schools that everyone tries to pay 40 grand to go to, and then there's really good charter schools, and then people kind of forget about the district schools. I like having the menu of choices. I think that's the most important thing, because you never know what resonates with a parent, and you never know, like, as a school leader, I know like my personality or my vision of the school is really important to communicate to the parents, so they get the whole vision of it, right? Because it might resonate with some, it might not with others, but that choice is empowering. And I think that would be the biggest one, I would say. And I think that like I'm also really a strong proponent of data, and I know that they're trying to get rid of the SAT test. They're going to start to kind of whittle that thing around. And And I would just sort of make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable, both as schools and as students, that we keep rigor. We keep like, hey, this isn't a summer camp. We have to learn skills, because when we hit the world, those skills are going to become very important for us. So I worry that there is a trend away from actual rolling up your sleeves, hard work, learning the standards, towards, hey, let's just all have fun and let's everyone get a trophy. So like that's something that I would say is a trend that I would be a little wary of too.
Mhm. I actually love your checklist of just taking the standards and making it more simple so parents and students can understand. It's simple, but yet I think so many schools fail to do that. Yeah, if you don't know, yeah, you can go to fourth grade and it's 4.0 point
Mhm.
something, or NBT point three,
Oh
and
yeah.
then students need to do this and that. The parents don't care about that. Okay, let's just say teachers are trained; they know exactly what it is, but students don't. So I love the fact that you just say, "Hey, I can find the common. I can add fractions that have the common denominators. I
Boom.
know
Yeah.
how to find I know how to add fractions without common denominators. It's as simple as that. So the student's like, oh, wait, I know how to do that. Instead of looking at a code and then whatever jargon is filled in the standard. So actually, I haven't heard that before.
And
I'm
you know what it
sure.
is too. Like the teachers are all like based on grades, right? So like there might be a math test with 20 different standards on it, and
Right.
the kid gets back, oh, I got a B, I got an 85%, cool, and they throw it away. And what we train our teachers to do is to circle every problem that they got wrong and connect that problem to a learning target, because a
Mm,
test is a wealth of information. If you look at each
right.
question, it's kind of meaningless if you get a B or a C or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And the same thing with parents. Like, it took a little bit of a lift there, because parents do want to just drop off their kid at school and say, you handle it, like it's
Yeah.
customer service. And, when you are in the market for enrollment, you do want to kind of really feed to what the parents are looking for, but challenging them to be that primary educator of their kid, I think in the long run gets a much better loyalty in our community and a much more engagement.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, we definitely need parents to buy in. If parents are not involved in their child's academics, parents, if you're a part of that, you're already doing a major disservice to you and your child. It's not as simple as just dropping off your child to school. Every study points exactly opposite of that. In fact, a lot of education happens at the home, and us as parents, that's your responsibility. You have to.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I know that life, we have work and we have this and we have so many obligations, but if you want your child to be successful academically, parents, you play a big role in this. I do want to go ahead and talk about school culture. Now, obviously, school culture is very important. It's a very silly question when I ask it, like, how important is school culture to you? Obviously, it's important. I think every principal would say that. The problem here is that when we actually take a look at the data and we take a look at the reason for a teacher frustration or teacher burnout, one of the top choices, aside from pay, aside from the workload, is actually a negative school culture. They are not a fan of their admin or principal. So I want to learn more about your school culture. You mentioned that you have a great school culture. So what does that look like? What do you do to make sure that you have a great school culture, that your teachers really enjoy their work environment?
Yeah, that's a year to year. That's a everyday kind of thing. I don't think there's a way to capture it and have it and hold on to it.
Mm,
I think it's something you fight for every day. I think understanding, I mean, myself as a teacher for 10 years, like having the street cred, understanding what the cycles, the seasons of it is, like what a February feels like, what report card conferences feel like
mm,
having true empathy for what they're going through, and really like giving them that ownership of that journey. Like, hey, you know what? You're in your first year. You're gonna have some behavior issues. That's the way it goes. And when I had that happen for me, this is maybe some things I tried out. You can try them out if you want. And there's also other mentor teachers. You should ask them what they did. I think one of the biggest detriments to, I think, a school culture is when you get into, here's the teacher edition, here's your handbook, here's what you must do each day. And I want to see lesson plans and I want to see that. I think if you approach teachers like they are artists and that they can create their own universe to match those standards in any way they see, like, so like, hey, you know what? Let's see how you get to add fractions. I want to see your style here. Let's see what you got. And it's sort of like, you know, it actually ends up empowering the teachers to be really creative, really innovative. And we shout each other out like, wow, you just had a great lesson on fractions. I'm going to try and steal that. And like, you know, it all is based around the data. It's always goes back to benchmarks and like, hey, your kids are really growing in geometry. What's your secret sauce right now? And they might say, well, I'm using a little bit of Go Math. I might be pulling Engage New York, Eureka. Like I want to make sure at the school I got a toolbox for them of anything they want to pull from, but I want to trust them as sort of craftsmen or artists that they can make those decisions in the moment of what's working, what's not. You know, it's got to be fluid. It can't be scripted. And I think when you have a school like that, those veterans are not like spending a lot of time planning at home. Like they plan the week. We call it a machine. You build a weekly machine, and once it runs, it runs. Right. And then you can kind of enjoy your job as opposed to being drowned by it, you know? I think each group's different. Like, you know, there are teachers who really love curriculum and teacher editions, and you have to be able to allow how to support that as just as well too. This year for us, like we're very vet heavy. So we, at one point we're a bunch of 20-year-olds. Now we have most of our teachers are in their 10 plus years of experience, which is good. And which is a little bit more rigid though too. So it's having that, making sure like a teacher who's used to like a chalkboard teaching direct instruction all day, you know, maybe sees themselves on video and sees their students and says, well, you know, how long did it take before those pencils started moving? Like, how long were you talking before any student action happened? Like, you got to find ways in for them to have the light bulb go off for themselves.
What a great response. But the statement that you made that I really like the most is that when we talk about school culture, it is a constant battle and it is forever changing. I think that's the best part about all of this, because we hear about autonomy, we hear about data driven, we hear about letting teachers wear jeans, but I actually love that, which is to hold and maintain culture. It's a constant battle. And if you're aware of that, you are doing the right thing. It's not, whereas the opposite is, well, we have we have these philosophies and you can take a look at the poster board and this is why our school culture is great. Next question, right?
Yeah. So people see right through that, man. Like I've seen school leaders that literally give the same speech every time, you know, like you matter or you inspire me or something like that. And that gets old after 3 or 4 weeks of that, you know?
That's exactly why I wanted to call that out, that I really enjoyed that response. It is a constant battle. And if you're aware of that, I think you're on the right track. And I think you answered a bunch of my questions. My next question was going to be, how can principals help teacher overcome burnout? But I think you've discussed that. So I'll pass it over to Vlad.
Yeah, my question before my last question would be, do you allow your teachers to wear a jeans? Because we have a lot of admins who are implementing it to support their school culture.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I would say. I mean, I actually am of the idea that, you know, being a professional at your job is important. So, you know, we have free dress for the kids on Friday. And I think that trickles down to everyone on Friday can kind of take a break. And, you know, I even see sweatpants and stuff. It is what it is, right? But I think Monday through Thursday, you know, being proud of where the kids are in uniform. I'm not mad at holding the professionals to what they're doing, because at some level it's their career. And so I think having them dress as if that this is their career actually ends up maybe not making me popular with them all the time, but like it does end up earning respect, I think. I think coming out of COVID, it was the hardest thing where everyone wanted to wear sweatpants all the time.
Yeah, but I want to add to that because, I think you hold, and I agree with you, Chris. We now hold the unpopular opinion, because now the popular opinion is, well, I can just show up in sweats and look at these compute software engineers that are working in the Bay Area, and they just look at the programmers. They make
Yeah.
$250,000 a year, and then they're in their sweats and they're in their tank
Hmm.
tops. First of all, can you imagine going into a bank, and your banker is coming out in a tank top and shorts? I
Yeah.
promise you, you're going to have some thoughts about it. I mean, the startup culture, I think, had a lot of influence, and the pandemic obviously had a lot of influence because when you're behind the camera, what you wear on the under the shirt doesn't really matter. But I have to agree with you, Chris. I think it is important
Yeah.
to be professionally ready. I mean, listen, if you land a job at a hot startup and they allow you to wear sweatpants, great. But guess what? A lot of places are not, and you have to look the part you play. Again, that's
Yeah.
probably an
Well,
unpopular
kids are
opinion.
watching, like families are watching. I think like it's a different game when you're a teacher. Like you're in front of like, 20 kids that are looking up to
Right.
you. You're showing up in sweats. Like that's going to promote that as an idea, like I think yeah, I don't know. I think what we also do though is we have a lot of spirit weeks. So we have like, crazy hair day or, there's all kinds of fun things to dress up like, all the holidays and stuff. So we take advantage of every opportunity to dress up
Mm,
crazy. But on those regular days, particularly like August, September,
Yeah.
I look at that. That's part of
yeah.
my evaluation is that you're coming on time
Mm,
and you're a professional. Just like that,
Okay.
we hold the kids to that level of rigor. I think we
right.
got to hold our staff to something like that too.
Now let's speak about one of the hottest topics right now is AI, chatbots, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
In New York, it's already banned. So,
Hmm.
and we know it's a growing debate over whether this technology is doing more harm or good, whatever. So, what are your opinion
Yeah.
on
I mean,
it? Maybe
that
it will
is
affect
crazy.
classrooms. Maybe we'll have to reimagine it, or what's your thoughts?
I mean, for us, I mean, we're K-8, so it's mainly coming from middle school teachers. I mean, on one side, you can do lesson plans that way, like you
Yep.
can, so there is something to be added to a teacher's toolbox there. Um, but I don't know, from the plagiarism perspective, I think that's going to be a losing battle. I think like if we're trying to chase down people using ChatGPT to write essays, that we're going to be sort of, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of historical examples of that, of like working backwards, working against the trend, right? Like, so this is going to go in this direction. Now, what I would say, and what we're kind of looking at is if you have a notebook and a pencil, you can't lie. I mean, so, hey, if you want to see what your kid can do writing wise, take the computer away, give them 45 minutes and a notebook and a pencil, see what they can do. And then use that for their learning key. Don't use something they go home on a computer to do, right? So like you can always call them out. You can always check to see where they actually are. But then again, if ChatGPT is able to let them flush out an idea, let them like organize their thoughts, that's not a bad thing. It's a never ending model for them to look at how to structure paragraphs, ideas. I mean, and what's great is even with the smarter kids, we've done things where we have them write an essay and then Chat GPT write an essay and then critique the Chat
Mm,
GPT because it is a little glitchy. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
it's not pretty, some of their writing styles, and you can feel the clunkiness to it. And I think to have kids see that and to see how they can finesse it and be a greater writer, I think that actually ends up making writing more of an interesting thing for the student, actually. Like, and I think on the other side too, it's asking the right questions because we're always about inquiry-based
right.
learning and Socratic seminars and stuff. Like, it's really a good exercise in asking good questions to get the right responses out of ChatGPT. So I don't know. At least from my angle now, I'm into exploring it as opposed to banning it for sure. And again, if you're worried about whether this kid could write or not, get a pencil and a notebook.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if schools doing it, but the only way to basically measure their level of proficiency is just as you said, just give them paper and pencil and make them write the essay just in front of you, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
it's
what's
not
more
gonna lie,
wrong?
right?
We are currently seeing a massive disruption with AI, specifically with GPT and other models that Google and other key players are coming out with. And I think it's fair to say that almost every industry or a lot of industries are very scared because of the job losses. But I will say that I am a huge advocate and I'm very excited for what AI in the very near future can do for education. Because unlike other industries, I think we're going to see a lot of students, or whoever uses it the right way, is going to greatly benefit from it. We're going to see a lot of ed tech companies come out with individualized attention.
Mhm.
That's very low cost for them. So now, with the Socratic method of just helping students just inquire and get them to understand the actual problem that they're trying to solve for, we have many students are now going to get much more individualized attention. And aside from that, I love what you said about advanced students. Right, if you're advanced, you can now come up and pick apart this essay that's done by AI and say, hey, you know what, I like this part, but I don't like the second paragraph because of X, Y, and Z. And that's great. That helps advanced students. So for all types of learners, I think there is a massive benefit. For teachers, there's a benefit. You can go ahead and create lesson plans quickly. So yes, I agree that I'm scared for a lot of other people, like copywriters and email marketers, and so many other things that we're going to see come out of it. But for education, I'm actually hopeful. Again, it's just my opinion. We don't know. We'll see, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, and this goes back to like the ed software stuff we had in COVID. There was a lot of that sort of like you get the question wrong, they play a video, or you get the question wrong, it gets easier. You get it right, it gets harder.
Right.
Like that adaptive technology stuff, and it's great. But I still would say there's this sort of human connection in terms of a brand new math concept, like straight out of the bag, never seen it
Mm.
before math concept, where like a live interaction somehow bridges some of these gaps, and it's hard to explain why, but that like there always will be a need for a human teacher in certain realms, and then all of this sort of adaptive technology and tutors and all that stuff is going to be amazing in reinforcing that learning and exploring it deeper. But yeah, it's true. We're on this sort of fork in the road where I can definitely see some schools diving full on into the ed software stuff, and then some schools hanging on to that traditional classroom. And as we're navigating at Everest, I really try to see how we can shoot the middle
Yeah.
and see
I
how we can use some of those tools in the toolbox, but not dive fully into it.
Oh, 1000%. Let me clarify my position for teachers are not going anywhere. In fact,
No,
we own
yeah.
a preschool in Brooklyn. So we have 25 teachers that work. And teachers are not going anywhere. No matter how advanced AI gets, you cannot take out the fundamentals of basic human connection. And when it comes to so this whatever we're speaking about right now, it's going to be a great tool, supplementary wise, to reinforce.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you're a teacher, don't worry, your job is secure.
Yeah, it's
There's
just
already many other issues, but
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
your
teachers
job is
also
secure.
have to adapt and learn this new technology so they can even accelerate and improve
Yeah.
their teaching styles, and
I mean,
basically they can
teachers are
use it.
really adaptable though, man. Like the way that they all hopped on to like Pear Deck or what all
Yeah,
Nearpod, and like it was like within a few months, everybody was
yeah,
having slide decks and stuff. Like I was very impressed at how flexible teachers could be in how they did that stuff. So I'm very hopeful that there'll be a new chapter of how we do this, and I think teachers are going to be in the trenches, sort of trial and error, seeing what
yeah.
works, what doesn't. And as long as I'm back to the data, like the
Mm.
actual standards being mastered in each classroom, that's our guiding, like that's our light, at the end of the tunnel.
Chris, I do want to ask you one last question before you let you go. Before we let you go, the question is: who has been the most strongest or most inspiring person in your life, and what lesson have you learned from them?
Ooh, I mean, there's been a lot. Um, if I were to think in terms of education, the
In terms,
person that's inspired me the most was actually my 10th grade history teacher. And he was the first one who really got me excited about reading history, like like, oh wow, that's super interesting. Like Alexander the Great did that, and then this, like, so he had such joy in just retelling the stories of all the different cultures in the humanities. And I think from there I realized that learning wasn't something to get an external reward. Like, I think I really felt in that year what intrinsic motivation to learn is, and I've carried that in my heart all the way through. And it's different how teachers can do it, but I think there's something really special about those one or two teachers in each school that really get intrinsic motivation for learning. And I think that, yeah, so if I were to point that out, it would be that. And obviously, like my wife, my kids, there's a lot of guiding lights in my life now that are the reason I get up every morning, for sure.
Yeah, I love that response. It warms my heart up, and especially if for other teachers out there, if you're a teacher and if you're listening, that should make you really happy, because Chris, I asked you who's been one of the most strongest and inspirational person in your life, and it was a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And then
in 10th
you
grade
are
of
now
all years too,
a 10th
right?
grade. Exactly. My answer is also a teacher. It was my 9th grade science teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't think, despite all the issues that are going around, and yeah, I mean, with teachers and burnout and frustration and pay, there's something undeniably beautiful that you can never take away from teachers, is that teachers have one of the most impactful roles in the world. And teachers, I think, need to understand and I truly believe this, every teacher throughout their life cycle of teaching will have changed at minimum one person's life forever. And that's all you need. I mean, that alone should bring you so much joy and content, because that one individual is going to now empower at minimum 100 people. And those 100 people are it's exponential. And that's why I love teachers so much, because not everyone says it, but a lot of students or successful people will always say, "Hey, man, it was my 4th grade teacher, or it was my 10th grade teacher, or it was my 9th grade teacher."
Mm-hmm.
And now take a look at the impact that they're making on the world. So it's just a reinforcement and a reminder to all the teachers, despite all the issues out there. I mean, it's a very important job and a very important role that you play. So, Chris, I want to thank you so much for your time. I want to thank you for sharing your insights and journey. Super excited to for your school and continued success. Thank you so much for joining us with us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, gentlemen. You guys are the best. And yeah, if you're on the West Coast, come look us up. We'd love to have you by.
Absolutely. Well, I love getting on boats. I'll tell you that.
Oh, there you go.
I've been on plenty.
We'll catch conference, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again, fellas. This was great. This was really great. You guys are doing great work.